GTM Podcast Buddhist Knowledge Mini Series Episode 10. Now we have come to the second part of blessing one, not associating with fools. From the previous episode, we had learned about how our discretion can dictate the way we think, the way we speak, the way we act in our life. And in this episode, we will learn the process of acquiring discretion into our life. Every time we have a transaction with a person, it is like a negotiation of tug of war between us to see whose discretion will brush off who. In a situation where people are unable to recognize good or bad examples of discretion, then the exchange of discretion will be like osmosis, flowing from a point of high concentration to a point of low concentration. If person A has a lot of good discretion and person B less, then person A's good discretion will tend to brush off on person B. If person C has a lot of bad discretion and person D less, then person C's bad discretion will tend to brush off on person D. In practice though, as adults with a degree of life experience, we don't passively let others' habits brush off on us. If we are able to recognize good habits and good discretion, then we will open ourselves up especially to absorb them. However, if we recognize bad habits and bad discretion, then we will try to protect ourselves from picking those habits up. Thus, normally we are selective and try to the best of our ability and discretion to pick up good habits while avoiding the bad ones. In this way, we can have transactions with others without losing our own virtues under their influence. You can compare it to visiting someone in hospital who has a fever. You can visit them, talk to them, and console them. You can do all these things without catching their fever, but you would try to avoid having them sneeze over you. There are some sorts of patients and some sort of illness, however, that are so dangerous that we cannot afford to have any transaction with that person. Such diseases like the plague are so contagious that it is not safe for healthy people to transact, specifically come into physical contact with them. Such patients, by the nature of their disease, need to be nursed in an isolation ward with no visitors. If they were animals, they would be put in quarantine. When considering the transmission of discretion, there are some cases of those so contagiously infected with faulty discretion that despite our immunity or our efforts to be selective, we will nonetheless be affected by their faulty discretion. Even if we start with healthy discretion, it will be undermined by the strength of negative discretion of those people. What more the danger if we are still inexperienced and impressionable, perhaps still children or lacking world experience, and don't even know what it means to be selective. These quarantine victims of faulty discretion, whether intentionally so or not, are the first and most fundamental obstacle we will meet as we try to acquire blessings. In the 38th blessing of life, we call such people by the technical name of fools. A fool is someone wicked or weak or feeble. They are made feeble by the fact that they habitually think, say, and do things that are unwholesome. The root of the lack in common sense which they can justify such unwholesome behavior is the fact that they don't have their mind centered or under their control. To call such a dangerous person a fool might seem like an understatement, because some fools might look like a proverbial giant punching sandbags, let alone a fragile human being. Thus, how come we use feeble for a fool? A fool is made weak like a person made weak by serious disease. We do not fear him on the basis of his strength or knowledge or ability to think, but because his disease is dangerous. There are 4 human strengths that need to be considered, as human beings have 4 different sources of power. 1. Physical strength. Different people are endowed with different degrees of physical strength. Anyone with plenty of muscles and no disability is endowed with the first storehouse of power. 2. Strength of knowledge. Derived from one's background of education and the experience of passing years. Having the ability to apply educated reasoning in useful subject is the second storehouse of power. 3. Strength of thought. Some people go through the same number of classes together. They have an equal amount of knowledge, but their ability to think through things using their knowledge may not be equal. Some people know so much, but it is of no use to them when they come to think things through. Someone may know how to mend an engine, but sit idle all day long. Why don't they offer their service as a mechanic or earn their living in an engine business? Sitting around all day long, waiting for someone to come along and find work for them? We can blame this on their having knowledge but not using the knowledge as part of their thinking. Thus, if anyone used both their strength of knowledge and their strength of thought, they are at great advantage because they are endowed with the third storehouse of power. 4. Strength of virtue. When one has both the strength of thought and mindfulness of what one is doing, when one is using one's knowledge and thought to perform good service to oneself and others, one is endowed with the fourth storehouse of power, strength of virtue. The human being has the potential to be endowed with all 4 storehouse of powers: physical strength, strength of knowledge, strength of thought, strength of virtue. Even if someone is endowed with sort of these storehouse of power, if their judgment is faulty, they will not be able to put their power in full use. If, for example, a foolish guy is physically strong and may be qualified as a professor with a PhD, with plenty of knowledge, but without the ability to think properly, he will want to apply his mastery of chemistry for dishonest purpose. For example, distilling heroin. Thus, even if you are endowed with only some of the 4 powers, you can still be classified with the fools, and those powers are not used to their full potential. At the most, they can use only 3 of the 4, like a 4-cylinder car in which only 3 of the spark plugs fire. It is of no use to anybody. If you have a 4-cylinder car, all 4 need to work in order to get benefit from any one of the 4. Thus, if you know your cylinders are damaged, you don't need to wait until none of them are left firing before you go for mending. In conclusion, when we define the meaning of a fool as someone weak or feeble, we can see more clearly now that it means that they are weak or feeble in doing good deeds. Now that we know about risks they present to our discretion and know a little about the reason for the fool's weakness, the next challenge that faces us is how to protect ourselves from them. As we shall see, we first need to be recognized fools. If we can recognize them, we can more easily protect ourselves from their influence. So everyone, now we know that how the fool can be affect into our discretion, our idea of thought. How can we protect ourselves from them? Let's find that out in the next episode, Recognizing the Fool. See you again in our next podcast.